Today's question is, lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment in court?
Not oh shit bad. Oh shit, I can't believe she said that. First jury trial, pretty serious charges. I'm cross-examining the alleged victim, and in answering my question she says, "Oh yeah, I lie all the time." Needless to say, I won that trial. Story from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court. Don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charge dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge facepalmed on that one. Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. Prosecutor suggested to me client that the canned goods he had burgled were to be used to trade for drugs. Me thinking the idea ludicrous, asked my client whether he has ever traded food for drugs. To which he replied that he once exchanged a frozen chicken for heroin. Needless to say, I didn't win that one. Sat in the public gallery at a bail hearing for a man accused of heinous crimes against a very, very young female relative. The judge started laying out the conditions of bail, and one of them was to surrender his passport. Man turned to his attorney and said, loudly, words to the effect of, "But you said I could fly back to my home country." The judge stopped himself and revoked the man's bail. I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer didn't even think would happen, because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with, but then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I am requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself, because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge, you had your shot and you missed, counsel. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you'd find my client's testimony untrustworthy, and as such, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge, that may be an argument for your carrier, counsel, but it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he fucked up so royally. That shit was mind-blowing on multiple levels. I was the defendant, representing a non-profit that I volunteered for. The plaintiff was a 60-something grandma who was looking for a retirement settlement after falling out of her jacked-up pickup truck in our parking lot. The premise of her case was that our parking lot was in bad shape, and that she fell into a pothole and broke her leg, which resulted in her having to take Coumadin and diminished her enjoyment of salads at the Friday night fish fry. No, really. It was going along fine, until my lawyer put up a photo of the pothole, taken the day of the incident, filled to the brim with water after a recent rain. He asked the lady if she had gotten her foot wet, to which she replied that she couldn't recall. He talked a little more about how perhaps if her foot wasn't wet, it might have been because she fell out of the truck and didn't really fall into the pothole. He asked again if her foot was wet, and she affirmed that yes, her foot was wet. The oh shit moment came when he went back to his desk, flipped through her deposition, and read the part where she was extremely adamant that her foot wasn't wet. Then he did some fancy legal stuff. The case was thrown out, and I went back to work. I was the dumbass that almost screwed myself. I had 2 charges in 2 different courts. I accepted the first plea, which almost always carries probation, but my plea didn't have that condition. When it came time to accept the second plea, the prosecutor didn't include probation because she assumed my first charge put me on probation. She said as much to the judge, and me being a big dummy almost corrected her. My lawyer grabbed my shoulder and, I shit you not, told me to shut the fuck up. She doesn't know. I was just interning in court during law school, but I'm a lawyer now. Fight in a club. Someone had broken someone else's jaw and had 6 friends with him that insisted he had been identified wrongly because he never have a beard, and the victim said he had a beard. They used a very specific phrasing to the tune of, "My friend doesn't have facial hair because he is a professional in the food industry and it would go against the regulations." After 3 of the witnesses had repeated the same exact phrasing, the judge stopped one to ask if he knew what a couple of the terms in that line meant, and the witness couldn't explain it. Defense lawyer got busted for instructing the witnesses. She'd also gotten the defendant to reject a plea deal that exchanged prison time for a fine and community service. Not exactly in court, but I was defending a juvenile robbery case where there was very little evidence. There was supposed to be 2 guys, but they only picked up this one kid. He had no stolen property on him. He was picked up like outside his own house, wearing different clothes than the victim had initially said. This kid was on the honor roll at school. His family seemed kind and were involved. He wrote poetry and played instruments. I actually believed it was a legit mistaken identity case. I went to meet with one of the kid's mentors for a character reference, and he exactly matched the description of the other robber. I was interning during law school prosecuting domestic violence cases. The deputy DA asked me to talk for the first time during a guy's arraignment for beating his wife. An arraignment is when the defendant hears the charges against them and pleads guilty or not guilty, basically. When the judge calls on me to speak, I got insanely nervous and told the defendant that his charge carried a maximum penalty of 30 years when it was actually 30 days. He freaks out. The crowd, some in the gallery were his family and friends, gasps. The judge basically stops me and says, "I think you mean 30 days, counselor." After which everyone, including the defendant, laughed at me. AskReddit, because a lot of you are worried about this. The evidence was pretty weak and the facts did not bear charging anything other than the lowest level misdemeanor, which, in conjunction with this being a first offense, meant that we were seeking 2 things primarily: counseling/anger management classes and probation. The intent being that any future problems can hopefully be avoided, and if not, we could stick the defendant with a harsh punishment the next time when we'd hopefully have better facts/evidence. Represented a pro bono client that had just turned 18 and was charged with serious property damage. I walk into his bail hearing and the judge looks at him and goes, "I knew you'd be back as an adult." The judge then turns to me and says, "Counselor, you may want to learn about your client's history. No bail." Edit, to answer some of the questions below. I considered it to be extremely inappropriate and objected to it. Juvenile records are sealed for a reason. The judge overruled the objection but made sure to articulate that his denial of bail was for reasons related to the instant case. The firm I was at had a pro bono program and worked with the public defender service in the area. The judge at the bail hearing wasn't the judge for all other hearings in the case. He just happened to be the one handling bail hearings that afternoon. Not in court, but a deposition. Plaintiff in a sexual harassment case that was suspected to be paid role play with her boss kept a very detailed sex diary on her work computer. At one point, she was asked to read from the diary for the record and asked if she had written the accounts and if they were true. She was asked at several points if she wanted her new husband to leave the room while she did this, but declined. Let's just say it was extremely kinky. She confirmed it was true, and the only mention of her now husband was that he was boring in bed, but she was going to marry him because she couldn't get her first, second, or third choice. He ended up leaving on his own after she read that part out and confirmed it was him she was writing about. I think this qualifies, though it wasn't me that was the lawyer. Got called for jury duty. Was at the jury selection phase, and they asked if anyone here thinks they should not. Blah blah. Defendant was in the room. I raised my hand. The defending lawyer looked at me like, "Oh, this ought to be good," and asked me to explain. I suggested I tell them in private. He insisted I tell the courtroom. I said, "Okay, I probably shouldn't be on this jury because I was on a previous jury for this man which returned a guilty verdict." Lawyer's face went, "Oh shit." Commotion and a wait while they looked up records. Yep, verified. Whole jury was now tainted. Everyone goes home. and they start over. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you liked the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.